my website is holographicbreathing.com. The last page is free webinars and videos, and the link to that webinar is on that page, and there's 5 or 6 other recordings of free webinars there as well that people can view. My view of the cranial fluid and that whole anatomy was from my cranial training. And I did 2. I did 2 full-length cranial sacral therapy trainings. And it was that there's this fluid around the cranium, and there's this fluid in the ventricles, and there's this fluid around the spine, and then a very thin layer of fluid down through the center of the spine. And then that is called the cranial fluid, and that is what you're working with. When I started doing holographic breathing, I started becoming aware of that fluid, but instantly it wasn't just that fluid around the cranium in the ventricles. It spread, it was everywhere, it was through the whole brain. I haven't got a picture. I might try and get a picture for you in a minute. But it went through everything, it went through the whole spine, and it spread out through the nerves, which is a huge no-no in the books. Everything is contained within the dura, around everything, and it doesn't go out through the nerves, and you've got the cranial fluid, and then you've got the brain. So I just thought, well, and as that happened for me, I could feel the toxins literally releasing out my brain, traveling down and traveling out through the nerves. So the anatomy that I knew says that experience is impossible, but I was getting better with it. And I thought, I don't care what the books say, I'm going to continue to do this as an experience, because I can feel that releasing, I can feel the toxins going, and I am definitely getting better. Years later, when I started teaching it, I thought, well, I better check this out. So I started looking up, and first thing I looked up was the cranial fluid. And then I looked up, well, what is this fluid that's actually in the brain, which is called the interstitial fluid? They're exactly the same thing, produced in exactly the same way. And I had cranial fluid is the most refined fluid in the body. That's what I was taught. But that didn't mean anything to me. I said, well, what is the constituent parts of these 2 fluids? Both of them, 99% water. Then the 1% is glucose, oxygen, salt, and then the 0.0001% is different stuff. So they're identical. I thought they're the same, you know. And then I started looking, what is to stop this flowing out through the nerves? Nothing. There's nothing to stop that flowing out through the nerves. And then I started looking at the myelin sheath, because I experienced it traveling through the myelin sheath. I looked into the myelin sheath, described as a sheath of fatty sheath to protect the nerve. It's coils of cranial fluid. It's the most beautiful cell. And as I looked at this, I realized these were making capillaries to produce cranial fluid and to let it travel in capillaries out through the body. So I thought, have I gone mad? You know, how can what is being said in the anatomy books and all those scientists be wrong and me be right? But I started painting pictures of it, because I was thinking, this is so weird. And then I was saved by the, because I thought, I'm just going nutty here. I was saved by that the same people, the same osteopathic school that I taught or showed holographic breathing. I was speaking to Jeremy Gilby, and I said, look, I see the cranial fluid all as one fluid and traveling out through the nerves. And I feel a bit nutty because the anatomy books say it's completely different. He said, yeah, we agree with you. We teach it as that, but they are the only school doing that I know of. All the other osteopathic schools, all the cranial sacral schools, they teach it as from the books. And I started looking at the fundamental principles behind it. And once you look at the fundamental principles, it is 100% absolutely impossible for it to work in the way that it's saying it's working in the anatomy. And the people who first made those pictures hundreds of years ago, they knew it. And ever since then, it has been portrayed in that way. And by, I can't go into, but the blood-brain barrier, what does that give you a picture of? For me, the picture was nothing can get into the brain and nothing can get out. So you can't get the toxins out. It's a myth. It's how the cranial fluid is made, both in the brain and in the thing. The way the myelin sheath is described stops people having the experience of it. The way it's produced, one, it's impossible. It divides the brain into this fluid that doesn't work, it doesn't do anything and goes on an impossible journey. And solid brain, it just divides and isolates the whole thing. And when you have that picture, you can't transcend. If you're viewing your brain as that, it's very hard to actually get a proper connection and evolve. In webinars, it'll be recording, so if people miss the webinar, and I'll be running more, taking it further, there will still be the recordings. I'm not going to say my way of seeing it is right, but I've had enough of it now. I am almost beside myself that they are still teaching this in cranial schools. Because if you understand the fundamental principles underlying, it is impossible. For instance, now I haven't got the things to describe it, but one of the main principles in your body, the blood comes out of the heart, very strong, very powerful, travels out through the whole body, through thousands of miles of little capillaries. And then the interstitial fluid comes out of the blood, that's got oxygen, nutriments, goes to the cells, they all get life, produces carbon dioxide. Now going back to the heart, it's going really slowly. And so the venous blood can't take as much. It's moving out quickly. The venous blood's going much slower, so it can't. The rest of it comes back through the lymph. The lymph is 4 times the size of the venous blood or the arterial blood. The same is true of the brain. You've got these strong, the aorta or whatever this rising thing is, comes up, the blood goes to the brain very quickly. Powerful, it goes, I think it's 400 miles of capillaries in the brain. It's really tiny, only one blood cell can go through it at a time. The whole pressure is down. The venous blood coming out of the brain sometimes is even going backwards, so it can't take all of that fluid back. So in the body, there's 4 times as much lymph. In the brain, there is no accountability. There is no, we don't know where that fluid goes to. 4 times the size of the arterial blood. It's like saying of your body, we don't know that lymph exists. That same thing is said of the brain. But for some reason, I don't know why, nobody questions it. And I'm kind of beside myself. Well, look, that blood's going in. It's going out of venous blood. You've got 4 times the size of that is not accounted for. How does that get back? I'm sorry, I'm on my little box now. How is that going to get back to the heart?
Yeah.
You look at the nerves, they're about the sum of all of those nerves coming, they're about 4 times the volume of the venous blood or the arterial blood leaving thing. It's the same. There's no reason why it can't flow out through those nerves. The myelinated glial cells, these capillaries, for me, they chain together and they pull it out through capillary action. And that, for me, I'll show it in the thing, how they create, how the cranial, and I've had to change the names because if you use their names, it pulls you into that paradigm. So I've called, rather than cranial fluid and interstitial fluid, the cranial fluid in the brain is filtered through the epidermal cells. The cranial fluid in the ventricles is created through the endothelial cells, and the cranial fluid in both is produced in exactly the same way. So I've called it the epifluid for the ventricles, the endofluid for the brain, and where they mix and merge together, the cranial sea. Then the myelinated glial cells, in the same way, they've got tight junctions. They produce cranial fluid for inside themselves, and that also travels out through the whole nerve. So you don't have to believe me. I won't say one thing in that webinar that cannot be substantiated in the books. I'm just saying from the anatomy shown in the books, their theory of how it works is impossible. But not only is it impossible, people having an image, they don't know what it is. They've got this image of the blood-brain barrier. That's unhealthy. That is an unhealthy image to have of your brain. Having an image of the myelin sheath, that's not very healthy for someone who's having trouble in that area. Having the image that it's all contained and doesn't move through the body and is isolated isn't healthy. So it's not just a matter of it's wrong for me. It's a matter of it's unhealthy, and it's unhealthy on a global level. And I really, actually, it's not just I want to show how I feel it. I want a proper discussion, and maybe your forum is a good place. You know, when you said, oh, I like that, and I thought that'd be great if we could have a discussion of this on your forum and have all the osteopaths, all the cranial sacral therapists, anybody who knows anything about anatomy, looking at the real underlying principles of what's happening there and actually properly bringing out that whole topic into the light. Because for me, I don't know if it's been done intentionally. I think that is stopping or slowing down at the very least the evolution of mankind. That if I brought out an anatomy book, it's actually how the ventricles work, say well, the blood, the interstitial fluid comes out of the body in the wrist and somehow goes all the way up through the arm and then goes back into the venous blood, still with all of its oxygen, still with all of its nutriments, and goes back to the heart, stopping the interstitial fluid there going into it, which used it up, and not using it in the wrist. You'd say, well, that's a crap anatomy book. But that's exactly how it's described in the brain. The fluid comes out of the ventricles, it's full of oxygen, it's full of glucose, it travels all the way down, all the way down the spine, all the way up the spine, all the way out, and leaves through the venous blood that's meant to be for the brain without actually feeding anything or doing anything. And everyone believes it. All the cranial therapists. Yeah, no, you have to know I'm sorry, I'm ranting, but I'm passionate about this. It's just built in me over this time, and I just want it to be known.
Yeah, that definitely sparked passion, and there's a lot of people listening that are going to want to be there Sunday, not only to hear you logically lay it out, because a lot of everyone here understands that like the logic of the medical system or the way it's been recently is not there, but not only to experience it, understand it logically, but to have it enter their experience as it's entered your experience, what's going on there. Yeah.
That'd be brilliant. Thank you for letting me say that. It's there. I'm a bit like a pressure cooker at the minute.
Martin has been doing this for a time. There's a backlog of recordings, but I suggest you catch him live Sunday and make sure you check out those seminars. And Martin will have on Sunday like images and all that ready to go. If I get provided some here, I'll put them over the video.
That is on the last page. My website is holographicbreathing.com. The last page is free webinars and videos, and the link to that webinar is on that page, and there's 5 or 6 other recordings of free webinars there as well that people can view.